It's something a wee bit different for you this week. A poll on our YouTube community page said yes, you guys would like to have a look round Ypres in Belgium, so come with us as we go check out the fascinating and very bloody history of this beautiful area. Well, to be fair, probably not quite as beautiful in 1918. Just a short hop across the English Channel, Belgium was one of the main battlefields during World War I. 100 years later, the scars of this conflict can still be seen in the landscape, so let's go for a wee look. Right, just to give you a wee taste of the front line, and we're actually standing on what was for a lot of the war exactly the front line. This is it's called Hooge. It's spelled H-O-O-G-E, but I think it's pronounced Hooge. Although a lot of this has been gathered here for the purposes of this nice little outdoor museum, they find this stuff everywhere, all over the area for miles and miles. You find shrapnel and bits of metal and yeah, everything. Look over here, that's there's a wheel obviously, which is not very exciting. There's a roll of barbed wire. That's sort of nasty stuff if you were trying to get from the German trenches to the British or vice versa. That was strung up in no man's land, and you can't really see now how nasty it is, but yeah, it's quite nasty. This little bit of land was fought over and changed hands a lot of times during the war as the front lines moved backwards and forwards. Behind me over there, I don't know if you probably can't hear it, but there's lots of screaming and shouting. That's because the German front line is now an amusement park. Right, let's go down into an old trench. This is quite muddy at the bottom, but it does give you some sort of idea. Obviously, I'm not getting shot at. I am falling over in the mud. Oh, it's a bit muddy. Oops. So all of the frontline trenches were shaped like this. They all go in zigzags as opposed to a straight line, because this way, if I got in here with a gun, I can only shoot as far as that corner, or if I threw a grenade in here, the explosion would only go along the straight bits, so that's why they're all zigzaggy and not straight. I've given up trying to show you the trench, I just end up falling in. I'll show you it from up here. Down there, that is looking into the trench. Actually, it was a good idea not to go any further. It looks a bit like a pond in the bottom. Right, are you ready for this, about this wee piece of land? Right, this trench was built by the Germans in 1915, and it was captured by the British on the 19th of July 1915. The Germans were pushed back. Guess how far they pushed the Germans back in that big attack? 50 metres over there. And 11 days later the Germans took the trench back, and then 15 days after that the British took the trench back, and it just kept changing hands. You know, thousands and thousands of people killed for a bit of ground you can see from side to side of. If you look at that bunker there, that was a German bunker which is now underwater in this nice pond. And this nice pond was formed when the British dug a tunnel under the German trenches, put lots and lots and lots of explosives in it, and then blew it up. Imagine being like a German soldier in your bunker or in your trench and suddenly the world gets turned upside down. Unimaginable. Unimaginable is a word I use quite a lot over here, and it's not a word I use very often. I have got quite a good imagination. There are a few like this dotted about. Most of them charge you to get in, and they've got like an indoor display, but this hasn't. This is just as you see it, and I quite like it. So this place was actually mined more than once. It was the big British mine, which was 2 tons of explosives, which is quite a lot. And then this lake was actually enlarged by 4 German mines when this area was occupied by the British. And it didn't. It made very little difference in terms of advancing and retreating, and yeah, the war basically ended up exactly where it started. Oh, and do me a favour, remember that wee phrase, ended up where it started, because we're going to head somewhere else tomorrow, and I'm going to show you something that will truly, I think, bring it home. And this is a wee bunker you can get into. It's quite interesting. It's probably very wet inside, so I'm not going to go in, but let's show you. It's pretty dark, horrible and wet today, and it's we are not getting shelled, and there's no poison gas wafting about or snipers. So yeah, imagine being in that. Yeah, no, don't imagine being in that. It's not very pleasant. Right, we're now back in Ypres, which is not looking at its best because the big war memorial to the missing is covered in tarpaulin, and the main square is covered in a big fun fair, which is okay if you like fun fairs. I'm not the biggest fan, but you probably knew that already. I'm a bit boring. To our left, that is the Cloth Hall, which is a sort of icon of Ypres. It's a very, very cool building. It's now, believe it or not, another war museum. There are some really cool old buildings in the middle of Ypres, and although these buildings look like they're very, very old, it was actually all rebuilt in the 1920s, because obviously during the First World War the Germans were shelling this place almost constantly, so it was absolutely battered. I mean, it was just a barren wasteland of rubble and destruction. Not very nice. And the rebuilding job that's been done is nothing short of stunning. I mean, the place looks like it's never been touched. This building site in front of us is the Menin Gate. It's a memorial to the fallen, and it's got space for guess how many names. People who have got no known grave, the bodies were never found or never identified, and there are 55,000 names on this memorial. And the saddest thing about that is it wasn't even close to enough. There's not a 35,000 on a memorial at Tyne Cot, which is a huge cemetery that I'm hoping to show you if we have time. Ypres' massive city walls, which are medieval, was one of the reasons it was so important to hold this place. If you could defend this place, you could stop the Germans getting through to the Channel ports, and if the Germans got through to the English Channel, then there'd be no way to resupply Belgium and the war would effectively be lost. So these walls were very, very important, and they're still very, very impressive. And on a beautiful day today, it's easy to forget what happened here 100 years ago. This is the inside of the Commonwealth War Graves Commission's little visitor centre, and these are signs for some of the graveyards dotted about. There are an awful lot of graveyards dotted about this part of the world. Thankfully, I'm not going to try and show you all of them, but I'm going to try and show you a couple that I think are particularly interesting. So on the bikes and off we go again. We're in Belgium, but we're still Scotland on a shoestring. So there is a man in a kilt. That is a soldier of the Black Watch, and we are at a place called Black Watch Corner. Now, you know they say that when wars can be won and lost in a day? Well, this is one of those places. Over those fields came the elite German Prussian Guard, and they were trying to break through to Ypres, and if they got through to Ypres, then the Germans could move on to the English Channel coast and the war would be lost. There'd be no way to resupply Belgium and no way to get your counter-attack going. So this point here is the point where the Germans had to be stopped. I can't do this flipping story without welling up. You can just imagine the story. We are the elite Prussian Guard, and we are going to capture Ypres, and then we are going to win the war because we are elite, we are the best of the best. And on the other side there's a wee shuggy for Dundee saying, no, you're not getting through. And they didn't. The Germans were beaten off and had to go and set up headquarters somewhere else. They did not get to Ypres that day, or indeed any other day. And just as the Black Watch faced down the Germans on that day, that chap there is facing the direction of the German attack. So there, that is Black Watch Corner. I'm going to go somewhere now where I can do some talking without, I got something in my eye there. It's a story of, if you're Scottish, you like that story. These woods may look lovely and green and verdant, but during the war, Polygon Woods were a constant hive of activity. There's bunkers and trenches and all sorts off in the trees there, and that's what it looks like today. Looked a wee bit different when the artillery had finished with it. Now we're heading up through Polygon Woods towards some cemeteries, which we might show you, and some baby elephants, which I've never seen before, but just found them on the map. It is very, very pretty. It's also quite a nice day today. It was heaving down with rain last night. It's not raining yet. So this is Scots Post. It's a German bunker that was captured by the British, or actually technically that's a lie, captured by the Australians, and was named after their commander, Mr. Scott, or Captain Scott, or something. Anyway, you want to go and see Scots Post? It'll be a big lump of concrete. It might not be very exciting. Oh wow, no, that is that is quite substantial. After the war, they used that to destroy ammunition. They put like old shells and ammunition and blew it up, and the thing still survived. It survived getting bombarded during the war, and people tried to blow it up after the war. These things were definitely built to last. Right, let's go and find some baby elephants. If you go into the woods today, you're probably going to go and look at the baby elephants. So there you are, there's one of the two baby elephant bunkers that survives. They were made by pouring concrete over like that curved metal that we saw back at Frontline Hoohey. That's quite cool. They're probably just left here because they're far too big to actually move. But if you look at the size of that one, it's quite small compared to the one that we just looked at Scots Post. I always wonder what is still out there in those woods just under the ground. Machinery and very probably men. That is the baby elephant, built by the New Zealanders in 1917 and 1918, they reckon. Not very big, but there'd be quite a lot of men crammed in there if there was lots of artillery flying about the place, which I guess here there usually was. Right, I've let you off for long enough. Let's go and look at a wee graveyard. This is Polygon Wood, and Polygon Wood is interesting comparatively because it is one of the graveyards that was in use actually during the war.
A lot of them were reorganised afterwards and sort of concentrated, but this is one where people were just sort of pretty much buried as they fell. So let's go for a wee look and see what we can see. And because it was in use in an active war zone, you know, shelling would hit it and it would be, you know, the ground would be churned up, it would be a mess. So people were buried here, they know were buried here, were recorded, but then the burials were lost. So you do get these headstones that say known to be buried in the cemetery. You also see some that say believed to be buried in the cemetery. We're not sure, but we think they're here somewhere, and here's their headstone. The New Zealanders held these woods, but at what cost? I mean, there's a rifle one 5th December, 4th December, 3rd December, 5th December, 5th December, 5th December. You're getting the idea. And in amongst all the mostly New Zealanders and British and other sort of allied Commonwealth soldiers who've all got this nice curved top on their tombstone, there is this gentleman, Mr. Hans Bogner, who was a German infantryman, and he died in 1918, as you can see there. Now, a lot of these British cemeteries, you know what I mean, allied cemeteries, because people were getting buried at the time, if they had casualties, whether it be the British or German, they were all just sort of chucked in the ground and recorded as best they could. That's why you find the odd little German headstone. And as well as the New Zealand Memorial and the British Cemetery, this is the Australian 5th Division Memorial that you'll see. Timed that wrong again because you can't actually see it. Let's get to the top of the stairs, then I'll show you the 5th Division Memorial. Yeah, there are lots and lots of memorials to various regiments and divisions and countries and all sorts here. This is the 5th Australian one. We fought in France and Belgium 1916, 1917 and 1918. And oh yeah, there's that. That is Butt's New British Cemetery. This is also one of the cemeteries where they find bodies today. They're brought here and buried, hopefully with an identifiable headstone, if not with a stone that says known unto God. That's the sort of thing that the wee drone is made for. This is such an amazing part of the world. It's also quite peaceful today. There were some people wandering about in the graveyard. I managed to hopefully not film them too much, but yeah, there's not a soul here apart from the two of us. It's great. Now we're going to go and get a cup of coffee. But because Bex is here, we don't have to tell her we can't find any scones.
Scones.
It's not scones, it's scones.
Scones.
No, it's not.
Scones.
No. It is a very interesting place to visit as a tourist, because tourism here started basically in 1919. As soon as the war was over, you get a Thomas Cook bus trip across from England to come and visit the battlefields where your father or your son or whoever very probably or very possibly, not probably, lost their lives. It's yeah, it's great being here as a tourist. I do like it. I've also got cycling sorted out. It's a viable means of transport as opposed to a near-death experience, which is what it is back home. All over this area there are little private museums, and this is one of our favourites. This is above a wee cafe. Literally, cafe is downstairs and upstairs is this guy's private collection. And the Gentlemans Archaeology has unearthed quite a lot of stuff. There's a sentry plate, you could hide behind that, and lots and lots of, it's just cool. It's just so much nice stuff. I told you about the iron harvest, and you could find the bits and pieces to this day lying on the surface. Well, here's some of the stuff that has been found here. It's just so cool. There's just so much of it. And for fans of dirty secrets of Scotland, there's the bottle collection. The soldiers obviously had to be supplied with food and drinks, and there's a big selection of the glassware. And down there, an even bigger selection of metalwork. This is such a cool wee museum. Really, really nice wee cafe. We can definitely recommend it. We're now going to go and look at a memorial called the Brothers in Arms Memorial, which is round about here somewhere. Don't know exactly where, but Brothers in Arms has been the gentleman that owns that little restaurant's like life's work, literally. The story behind this memorial I quite like. It depicts two brothers called John and James Hunter, but it's for all brothers who lost a sibling in conflict. And during the war at Polygon Wood, one of the brothers was killed in the arms of his other brother. And the brother said, one day we're going to come back, and I'm going to come back for you. So he was buried, and then the body was lost. And then I think it was 2006, the guy that owns that found 5 or 6 Australian corpses when he was excavating. So one of those was the missing brother. So they are, he was indeed recovered. He was indeed given a proper burial. I believe he's at the Butts Cemetery that we were just at not long ago. When I first came here about, I don't know, 20 years ago, they were just starting to plan for this and fundraise for it, and now it's nice to see it completed. It's one of the better memorials. There are some memorials that you go to visit that are a bit, yeah, they're not, not very impressive. This one is, yeah, it's a sad story, but it's also a beautiful sculpture. It is a beautifully designed memorial. Richard's having a wee lie down to try and get an arty angle on the statue, and I'm going to go and talk to the robotic lawnmower. No, no, don't be shy, back you come. It's so cool. There's a couple of them zipping about. What a great idea. A good way to keep the grass unchecked without having to actually do any real work. Right, nice wee museum, and now we're off to have a look at something else. Believe it or not, it's also to do with the First World War. Our next wee stop is one for all our Canadian friends. This is Mount Sorl, which is also known as Hill 62, and it's a place where the Canadian Army really started to come into its own in 1916. It is a place with a cracking view. Probably not quite so nice in 1916, but this is Mount Sorl, and this was part of a line that was held by the Canadians. We're heading down now back towards the Menin Road, where we started off several hours ago, and this is going down through Sanctuary Wood, and Sanctuary Wood is one of those places that was given that name by the soldiers at the time, because being in the wood was probably a little bit safer than being out and about, even when there wasn't actually much of the wood left. This is the Sanctuary Wood Museum on our left. I think Richard wants to stop here for an ice cream. I am not going to argue. Except we can't, because it's not open. It looks decidedly very not open. On the way down the Canadian Road, there is this, which is Sanctuary Wood Cemetery, another immaculately kept Commonwealth war grave. There's just so many of these. I've not shown you even half the ones that we've gone past. We've come somewhere else that is quite interesting. Timed it exactly wrong, because a whole busload of people have just shown up, and Richard is standing in all of their photographs. This is one of the more iconic statues in the salient. That is, it's called the Brooding Soldier, and it commemorates the Canadians here that faced the world's first gas attack. The Germans had a wonderful new weapon that they'd try. It was called poison gas, and there was no defence against it. These clouds rolled through, and there was nothing that the poor guys could do apart from stand and face it. If they withdrew, there'd be a gap in the line, which actually there was. The line opened up because of the gas, but then the Germans failed to capitalise. They didn't think it was going to be quite as successful as it was. 2,000 men fell in those gas attacks. It was just such impeccably bad timing, that busload showing up. I think they're actually Canadian. There's a guy at the back wearing a Made in Canada t-shirt, so yeah, they're out finding out about their nation's history. It is nice to see this place still being a place of pilgrimage when these guys are learning something. The tour guide is doing his tour guidey spiel, which is probably a lot more accurate than the drivel that I talk, but you get the idea. It's a nice place, it's a nice statue. He's up there on his pedestal looking down at the tourists saying, what are you guys looking at? Right, let's get to Langemark before the busload of tourists show up there. And I know we're tourists as well. We have come, I always say we have come, that's something else to say. Anyway, we've come about 8 kilometres away from that big Canadian gentleman we just saw, and this is a place called Langemark, and this is the trench system from which the gas in that gas attack was released. A line from here towards Polkapelle, where the Germans had all their wonderful innovative gas apparatus set up. And Langemark now is most famous for the German cemetery, because at the end of the war, Germany had little cemeteries dotted about just the same as the Allies did. But obviously at the end of the war, they weren't quite as popular. So a lot of the cemeteries were sort of rationalised and put into major sort of concentration cemeteries. And I'm going to say this is the biggest. I think this is the biggest German cemetery. If not, it's certainly in the top 2. I'll show you what it's like once we get inside. I think you'll like it. We are at the gate of Langemark Cemetery. Let's go for a wee look. In this little sort of entrance building, there are names. Lots and lots and lots of names. Just like the Menin Gate, I suppose, the same sort of thing. A bit of remembrance. These people are written down. There's Peter Klein and Peter Klein and Wilhelm Klein and Arthur Kleiner. It's quite a sobering place when you see this. If you think this is sobering, wait till you see inside. Langemark was first used as a German cemetery quite early in the war, and because it was one of the bigger ones at the end of the war, it was where they decided to concentrate all the burials. So when you look around here, it's not like the British military cemeteries. There aren't lots and lots of white headstones in neat rows. What you've got instead is something that I always think is much more, I don't know, I just love this place. See what you guys think. There's something like 40,000 people buried in this cemetery, all in these graves that are sort of communal. There's 8-10 people per grave, and every so often round about they've got these little crosses dotted about, which I always think looks really, really impressive. the British and the Allies got the big impressive field of white tombstone, I think in its own way this is probably even more impressive. This is a bit they had to clear space to make way for that. That is called Comrade's Grave, and that is all the bodies that were brought in from other graveyards when the other graveyards were decommissioned and taken apart. And under there are 25,000 people buried. And of that, 8,000 have no name, they don't know who they are, but the 24,000 that are named on these tablets around the sides. An awful lot of names. There's all the plaques on this side and on the other side, and also the same over there. So there's lots and lots of men's names written here. I quite like this as well. It always made me smile the first time I saw it, because there's all these 20-odd thousand German names, and also in there is Private Cargill of the Royal North Lancashire Regiment and Private Lockley of the Seaforth Highlanders. I don't know how they came to be mixed up with all the Germans, but possibly they were treated in a German aid station, died in a German aid station, and ended up in one of the German cemeteries. And the poor chaps in here are watched over by this rather impressive statue. There are a total of 44,000 people in this graveyard, of which 25,000 are in there. If you want to put that figure of 44,000 into some sort of perspective, Tyne Cot, which is the biggest Commonwealth war grave by a long way, has got 12,000 people buried in it, and most of them are unknown because that was a concentration graveyard again after the war when they got all the bodies out from the battlefields. Many of them were too far gone to identify. This has been a very, very heavy episode. I do hope it hasn't put too many of you off. If I could start a history channel and I thought anybody would watch it, I probably would. But for now, Bex and I are having far too much fun shoestring adventuring for you guys. These crosses are just perfect. I don't know who designed them, but they're amazing, because there's a big scale one over there, and you saw the smaller scale ones out in the middle of the sort of burial field. This is, yeah, I like this place, you can probably tell. I'm glad that we came here. I'm glad that we brought Daisy, because we weren't going to come, because we're out on our bikes these last 2 days. And yesterday we did 30 kilometres, and today we did 30 kilometres, and yeah, frankly my bottom has had enough. Right, that's the big and famous German cemetery. Now let's go and look at its big and famous Commonwealth equivalent. We sampled the sombre atmosphere at Langemark with its 44,000 burials. This is Tyne Cot, which is the largest Commonwealth cemetery in the world. It's got a very nice visitor centre with lots of really cool stuff. There's some things that they excavated. Oh, that's new. That wasn't there last time I was here. That is quite a large cart. Obviously, you knew that. You didn't need me to tell you that. So that is the visitor centre, which has had a lot of stuff taken out of it. There used to be some interesting memorabilia in there, but there isn't anymore. Anyway, that's enough of the visitor centre. Do you want to go and have a wee look at the... yeah, sorry, it's another graveyard. There are quite a lot of graves here. Like a mind-numbing quantity of graves. We're not going to go around saying hello to all of these guys, but hello to everyone who's here. A soldier of the Great War, name unknown. A soldier of the Great War, we know his regiment, but name unknown. A soldier of the Great War, name unknown. Soldier of the Great War, yeah, I get the idea. I don't even know how to begin to describe this place to you. You can, well, you can use your imagination. You can see it. It's quite a moving place, quite a thought-provoking place, and probably an excellent advertisement for the futility of war. Some more Canadians, obviously brought from a graveyard that was recorded. There's Private Hughes, 15th November 1917. There's Private George, guess what, 15th November. Private Harris, 15th November. Private Wigmore, 15th of November. Yeah, it's you see these things, it doesn't half make you think. If you're wondering why this place was called Tyne Cot, that's because there was a bunker here that was disguised as a cottage, and it became a dressing station after it was captured by the Australians. Now, the Australians pushed through as far as here with the New Zealanders and then tried to get onto the village of Paschendale, but failed. And eventually it was the Canadians that actually made the breakthrough and made it to Paschendale, and there's a big memorial to the Canadians who made it actually in the village of Paschendale, so we head there next just for the sake of completeness. If you're wondering what happened to Tyne Cot itself, the German fortification, it's actually under the Cross of Sacrifice. That was the King's idea. The King came across here in 1922 and said, we need to build a Cross of Sacrifice, let's build it on top of the bunker. And up there through that wee window you can still see the wall of the original bunker, the original Tyne Cot. And above that is an amazingly well executed Cross of Sacrifice. If you look down there, it's all perfectly manicured row upon row of gravestone. If you come up here behind the blockhouse, look, it's all completely different. It's higgledy and indeed biggledy. And that's because that was a casualty clearing station, a medical centre where people were brought from the battlefield because it was just on the front line, and anybody that died was just buried right next to it. So this bit of the graveyard here is all actual, like, in the heat of battle hostilities graves. A soldier of the Great War, the Australian Regiment, Rifleman Callaghan of the King's Royal Rifle Corps. These guys died probably in that, and we're just trying to stay ahead of the coach party that has just arrived, so let's get a crack on. And in amongst all the Commonwealth War graves, just behind the blockhouse, there's these two, Otto Bieber and a German soldier, 1914-18. They are buried here as well. The bodies were not removed in any sort of spite. They've just been left where they were buried during the war. And whenever you get kids here, they always climb all over the cross of sacrifice. I don't think that the Commonwealth War Grave Commission or the people that did it mind, because if they did mind, they wouldn't have put steps in it to get up for a look from the viewing platform up there, which is quite nice. I would take you up there, but it's full of kids. You can see how much of a hurry they were when they were burying these poor guys in this, it's probably just a shell hole they put people in, but there's 3 or 4 for each stone, and then behind it there's 8 unknown soldiers and 4 Australian soldiers, and then yeah, so you see it's people were just buried in the nearest available plot of ground, that being here. At this point when they were getting buried, there's probably still artillery zapping about, so yeah, probably wasn't time for much of a ceremony. Get them in a hole, fill it in, and then move on to the next. Yay, all the little kiddie winks have gone away, so we can go up the steps and have a look from the platform top here. We're now climbing up on top of the Tyne Cot, on top of the German bunker, so that's quite nice. I've never actually climbed this before, I've never noticed the steps on the back. So there you are. Yeah, a slightly better view of the row upon row of perfectly aligned burials there. Over there, there's another German bunker, and over there, there's another German bunker, so the bunkers are still here. Up close and personal with what's got to be one of the biggest crosses of sacrifice in any Commonwealth War graveyard anywhere. Somewhere in here there's an interesting inscription that I can't find, because families could have what they wanted put on the bottom of the gravestone, so you get like loving husband and father, or you know, what greater sacrifice can man make, you know, nice things like that. And this guy's family had put on his tombstone, sacrifice to the fallacy that war can end war. Their name liveth for evermore. That was phrasing that was chosen by the writer Rudyard Kipling. That was his contribution, was that slogan, I guess, those words, because he lost his son in the Great War and spent a long time after the war looking for him. I don't think they ever found the body. We're going to go now and have a look at the Canadian Memorial at Paschendale, because that's quite interesting. To get from here to Paschendale, which is not very far, cost the Canadian infantry 16,000 men. These numbers just become, it's just 16,000 here, 20,000 there. The Battle of Paschendale and the sort of battle for this area cost about 300,000 lives on both sides. That's a lot of people. That's obviously it's a lot of people in sharp. The last wee bit for this scoot about Ypres salient is it's another Canadian thing. This is a memorial to the Canadian assault on Paschendale. Paschendale is a village that is behind me. And this is another thing with those numbers that make your brain go, ooh. So, if you take this as your starting point, that church over there is in the middle of Paschendale, and that was the objective. That's what the Canadians eventually took. Guess how far away it is? Go on, guess. I'll tell you. It's 700 metres away. Number of casualties to get there, 16,000. 16,000 casualties, including 4,000 men killed to get 700 metres through mud that was often waist deep, attacking an enemy that was very well entrenched and very well battle hardened by this time. The Germans really knew what they were doing. There's a wee blurb about it for people like pausing and reading things, but look at that. I mean, it's only just up there. How can it take like 16,000 casualties to get from here to there? A bit different then. It would have been a massive morass of mud and blood and yuck, but still, it's not very far. It just shows you kind of wonder why the British High Command sent the Canadians to do this. You know, political number of men that were going to die trying. They might as well use colonial troops as risk bad publicity back home. I don't know, I'm maybe being a bit sceptical about the British High Command, but it does seem that the Canadians, the Australians, the New Zealanders, the Indians, they got some of the worst sort of assignments of the whole war. It can't just purely all be by chance, do you think? And I forgot to mention the Samoans, and particularly the Newfoundlanders, who, if you ever go to Beaumont-Hamel in France, and one day I might take you there, they had an absolutely horrible assignment at the Battle of the Somme, which basically wiped them all out. The country just, lost all of its young men. Newfoundland paid such a huge price to be part of the British war effort. They gave money, they gave men, they gave munitions, and it bankrupted them. This little arch is one of two. It's twinned with something called the Last Steps Memorial Arch in Nova Scotia, in Halifax, Nova Scotia, where 350,000 Canadians took the last steps on Canadian soil before they came across to fight in Europe. And this, I suppose, the Canada Gate here is where lots and lots of Canadians took their last steps before battling their way up there through mud and unimaginable horrors to take a village that was of no real use to anyone by that point. There was nothing left of it. Another day, it's another graveyard. We've come away from Ypres, further down the front line, to a place called Mons, and specifically to Saint-Symphorien Cemetery, which is very interesting for a number of reasons that I'm now going to show you. Mons was the scene of the first real battles of the First World War. This is where the British were dug in and the Germans attacked and pushed the British back almost all the way to Paris. Well, the British and the Allies. I say British, you know what I mean. So this area was in German hands for virtually the whole war until 1918. And what they did was they wanted a cemetery for the German and the, quote, English, unquote, fallen. And a local landowner said, you can have this bit of ground as long as you treat the two sides equally, as long as the Germans and the Allies are given sort of equal status. This is a really rare graveyard because the Germans and the Commonwealth forces are buried side by side. And obviously, when this was inaugurated, the war was going to be over by Christmas, so they didn't need a lot of space. It is a really, really beautiful place. It's been set out like a sort of arboretum with lots of trees and lots of plants, and it was maintained by the Germans for the whole duration of the First World War. And at the end of the war, it was taken over, and obviously we won, so the place was remodelled a little bit to make it a bit more airy. And of course, they had to add the Cross of Sacrifice. So over there you have the British, or the Commonwealth Cross of Sacrifice. And next to it, that obelisk is dedicated to the men of both sides. It's dedicated to the Germans and, quote, the English, unquote. I knew that getting my EU drone licence would be worth it in the end. One of the advantages of Brexit, us leaving the European Union, is you now need a separate certificate for flying in the EU and the UK. So I am now registered as a drone pilot in Ireland. You can register in the first EU state that you fly in, that for me was supposed to be the Republic of Ireland, but it wasn't. And the good thing about that is if you do it in the Republic of Ireland, the questionnaire and the forms are all in English. So the First World War started here, and then the front line moved, the Germans pushed forward, the front line moved up to Ypres, where we just were. But then the counter-attack at the end of the war, front line pushed back, and guess where it ended up? Here. The war finished exactly where it started, and nowhere is that more sort of clearly indicated than the fact that this is Private Parr. He was a cycle messenger and he went missing on the first day of hostilities. So he is reputed to be the first British serviceman killed in the First World War. That was the very, very first of quite a few. And you want to know where the last British serviceman killed in the First World War is buried? There. This is Private Ellison, and he died just before the guns fell silent. So these two graves are literally Private Ellison, Private Parr. They're facing each other, and that's apparently by pure chance. Yeah, and one of the three regiments that defended Mons in the very early days of the war were the Royal Irish, so that's why the word English on the monument up there is, probably a bit sticking in the throat for all the Irish people that are in here. But we Scots and the Welsh and Irish are kind of used to getting called English by foreign people. Please stop it, because we're very much not. And these little stones here are the German stones. It's unusual to see Germans with their own headstones, as we've seen before. Usually they are lying down, or the odd sort of little one that's snuck into a British or Allied cemetery. But here, this was a German military cemetery, one of the few that wasn't stripped apart and moved somewhere else at the end of the war. That's probably because there's German bodies here and also Allied. It is such a nice and very, very peaceful place. It was all inaugurated, as I said, by the Germans, and there was local dignitaries, and German High Command came here when this place was opened. It was supposed to be a showpiece centre of remembrance for the First World War, even while the First World War was still in its very early days. This was going to be where people would come on a pilgrimage. If only people had known what was still to come. I wonder if they'd have put so much effort into commemorating the Great Battle of Mons. The wee German graves also have the people's hometowns on it. So there's Graffiter Karl Kark from Kiel and Graffiter Wilhelm Hansen from Kiel, and they were all from 1914. It's all so prettily laid out. It's laid out more like a garden than a graveyard, because here we have a little square of Allied graves. These are men mostly of the Royal Irish, I think, from the last time. Yeah, Royal Irish Regiment, 1914, all the way along there. A lieutenant from the Middlesex Regiment, again at 1914. So you've got this little square up here, which is quite pretty. And then down there, look at that. How cool is that? It's just a little circle of gravestones with a nice obelisk thing in the middle. And on the little obelisk thing in the middle, it says, "Here repose 45 English soldiers of the Royal Middlesex Regiment." Remember, that was put up by the Germans. Right, we're going to take a wander up the hill now and have a look at the view from the top of this little landscaped cemetery. I think you'll quite like it. There are some, well, we've seen the obelisk and the cross of sacrifice already, but we'll go up for a closer look. Down in front of us, the Commonwealth War Grave guys are hard at work keeping the place looking spick and span. Lest we forget, from the 4th of August 2014, so that was the centenary of the start of the First World War. So we're going to go up these stairs now, and I'm going to probably not gibber, but certainly waffle a bit as we head up to the highest point for a wee look around. And this is where the obelisk is the sort of centrepiece of the graveyard is. So this was put up by the Germans when the cemetery was first opened. And then over there, the cross of sacrifice was added after the war when the place was sort of tidied up a bit and reorganised. A lot of trees were taken down to make it more like an English country garden, apparently. I'm guessing if by this point you're still watching, you quite like all the old war stuff and the graveyards, so I hope you're enjoying this one. We made this detour across here especially for you guys because I think this place is amazing. We're actually on our way to Germany now. For some strange reason, I've decided to run round the Grand Prix track at the Nürburgring and then cycle round the big long one that's known as the Green Hell. So that, that sounds like a lot of fun in inverted commas. And that's it for this little unplanned episode of Scotland on a shoestring from Belgium. I suppose we could still say it was on a shoestring because nothing we've done has actually cost us any money to get in. I do hope you've enjoyed it. We put a little poll up on our community page. If you've not seen that, go have a look. And people voted for us to come and do this. About 90% said, yes please, I'd like to see some of Belgium. And to the 10% that said, no thanks, I don't really want to see any of Belgium. Don't worry, back in Scotland again next week. So if you have enjoyed this, please remember to like and subscribe and all that gubbins, and we will see you again very soon.